Professor Georges Charpak, welcome to Stockholm and to this Nobel interview. You are one of the very few French scientists who have been awarded with the Nobel Prize. Why is it so?
I know a lot of very good scientists in France, and I don't know the rules of the games, since it was a good surprise to have the Nobel Prize. And it so happened because what I did was important for the activity of other physicists who have had the Nobel Prize using the instruments they have made. But I don't feel it is the most important thing I have done.
I see. What is the most important thing you've done?
Well, I've worked on many detectors. Some were very elegant, useless, and didn't have a Nobel Prize. So this one was not the most elegant, but it was a useful problem.
You have also written a biography. My name is Grisha. Where does this name come from?
Well, I am born in Ukraine. It is now Ukraine, it was Poland, it was on the border. So I had a very agitated life at the beginning of my life, because I was born in a place where there has been 10 years of ethnic fights and revolutionary fights.
Between Ukrainians and Poles?
Between the Bolsheviks, the anarchists, the Poles, and the peace came in 1922 when the Bolsheviks were beaten by the Poles and the border was just on the other side.
So everybody was marching through and
I was on the western side, and it is fortunate because it was a very underdeveloped country, and I would have survived maybe the ethnic conflicts because I was of Jewish origin. And I came to France at the age of 7, and I found a country which for me was a paradise, because I could enter to school. We were poor, but I had the same education as somebody who was rich. I never found any obstacle entering into a school when I was in Paris.
So how come you got interested in science?
I was not interested in science, I was interested in everything. I was reading Jules Verne, Alexandre Dumas, even Lenin. I wanted to change the world. I was interested in the world. And France was a place where you had a kind of intellectual evolution between the two wars. You had the fascism coming up, the anti-fascists fighting.
When was it, you mean? In the 50s?
I came in 31, so between 31 and 40, when the Germans arrived, my adolescence was embedded into an atmosphere of very hot discussion. So
you could become a politician?
No, I could become a dictator.
A dictator, okay.
No, I mean, at that time...
So it's better with a Nobel Prize, but
yeah.
Okay.
At that time, at this age, you don't do politics, you do revolution. And I participated to the war. I was lucky enough to survive. And I started to do science after the war.
Where were you during the war?
I spent 1 year in jail in southern France and 1 year in Dachau, which is a concentration camp. And that didn't help for my education in physics, because I was working with on a field, landing field, and I was working hard, moving earth. But I survived. I was lean, And I'm trying since years to try to reach the same line, but it's hopeless. But, and then I started to do science really at the age of 24. But by that time I had an engineering degree, and I entered into the laboratory of Juliot-Curie, and it was a blessing, because there were good scientific tradition there.
And the good tradition of Nobel Prizes.
And tradition of Nobel, well, in the sense that the people who have had the Nobel Prize and were leading the laboratory, although they were very busy, they were speaking of all the inventions they have made and which they have not made. That is very important. History of science played a very important role for me. Before I knew well how to do an experiment, I knew why Joliot has missed the neutron, why he has missed why his wife missed the fission, but why they succeeded in having artificial radioactivity, and even why they almost missed the other things by doing very nice experiment but didn't come to the conclusion. That is science. Science is doubt, is research. It is not something which is, and that is the danger of teaching, which is too academic, in which the people explain you a kind. It is like the logic thing coming out from a computer, which is not true.
It's not the success story, you mean?
Yeah, you have intuition, you have passion. So I consider it as a very important period of my life. And I was 24 and I learned then to make instruments. Why? Because I had, in the laboratory, we didn't have the instruments, we had to build them by themselves, by ourselves. And I learned physics that way. So why I have a special connection to physics through the channel of detectors. Because I had to detect particles. I was in a nuclear physics laboratory. What do you do in a nuclear physics laboratory? You detect particles. So I imagined detectors, and my imagination had been developed maybe in my childhood when I was traveling. Because after all, when I was 2, I went to Palestine, in Haifa, and I came back 2 years later. When I say I came back, my parents came back.
Brought you
Brought me there because they were breaking stone on roads. And in 31, we came to France because the French were making an exhibition on on their colonies. So my parents obtained a visa as tourists. They were so poor, but they had a visa to come to Paris, since they had a relative who was living in Paris, and we arrived there and we stayed there. So we were not kind of immigrants. We say we go to France, we go to the consulate in Warsaw, and we get a decent visa. That is not the case. So I came to France, and when I came to France, it was a paradise. I discovered in France one thing which was essential: tolerance. And that was the richest of France. You could find people who were intolerant, who were fascists, but they were not the majority. And there were enough of the people who were tolerant and who had curiosity towards people who were foreigners. So, and I found, in no time I had French friends. So it was finished. In 1 year I was speaking French and imposed French in my house, at home. And that is something which should be underlined. There are not so many countries where a foreigner can come and he doesn't have even to live with other foreigners unless he needs some help. I mean, and especially for the children. I think the children have a greater sense of hospitality than their parents. They're more ready to play with you. If you are the same age than the parents, they think, well, maybe we'll fall in love. He will want to marry my daughter. I mean, we better separate them. So
you have to start early.
Yeah, you have to start early. It is why I'm very glad that the effort in education in which I'm involved starts at the age of 5. And I can see we start in suburbs and in places where we have 10 nationalities. And the children have no problem interfering with each other and playing with each other and being class with each other doing science. We call that hands-on. It is la main à part. It is a brand of science where experimentation in group plays a very important role. And I can see the benefic effect of this approach to teaching and to social integration.
Yeah, so I understand that it's very important to get started early, and there is much work to be done. So good luck, Professor Charpak, and thank you.
Thank you.